Welcome to Music Mania. I'm your host, King Crusoe. You can call me KC, and this week there are several new album releases to get to, so I might as well not waste time so that I can talk about them. We're going to start off with New Delhi by Bloodywood. Now, in fairness, I have to say about this band and this album before I really post a review for it is I not listened to anything Bloodywood prior to this album. There were a couple of the singles that I heard offhand to one degree or another because of reaction videos on YouTube or something like that. And that's, what got the band on my radar. But aside from a couple of those tracks, I forget which ones, aside from Tadka or however you pronounce it, I have not listened to any of these guys' previous work. I just know there's kind of a rap metal, new metal type of stuff going on as a whole with Bloodywood, and New Delhi was fine. I was actually definitely expecting this album to hit with me a lot more than it ended up actually doing so. I'm only going to give this 2 out of 5, unfortunately, and going to give the title and might recommend, to a specific audience. People who are going to really enjoy this are going to really enjoy this probably. But as far as how it sat with me wasn't as much as I wanted it to. I wanted to like this more than I ended up liking it. And I think a lot of that is just because it's too long. It's 33 minutes, only 8 songs, means the average song length is over 4 minutes. And I quite frankly don't think this album really justified that runtime. I think almost every song could have been upwards of a minute shorter and it would have been better off for it. Next up, we're going to talk about Everything Rots by CABAL, and I don't know why there's no, album cover on this release for whatever reason, but that's just the way things are. I thought this release was super solid. If you enjoy deathcore just as a genre, you are going to like Everything Rots. I do not see that not being the case, really. I don't have a whole lot of thoughts on the album itself. There are a couple standout tracks, a couple standout moments, but I would say this is just deathcore through and through. It's just doing what it's doing, and that's about it. It's not going to really surprise you. It's not going to wow anyone to any specific degree. I think the most notable thing that I could say about Everything Rots is that I really was, and even currently am, waffling between a 3.5 and a 4-star rating for this one, because I think it's just super solid. It's definitely worth 4-star rating, but I do want to re-listen to it a couple times before I fully feel justified rounding it up as opposed to down like I did for the purposes of this review. It's super solid album. If you like deathcore, you're going to like this record. Next up, we're going to talk about the major release of the week and the one that I'm most excited to talk about. That is A Day to Remember's Biggle album, Volume 1, which I think is actually super solid. This album is actually unironically pretty great. There's a couple reasons for this. Number one is that there's only a couple tracks on here that I would say lean more bad than good. I think that Silence is pretty nothing burger of a song, and Feedback's just kind of all right. Apparently, I did listen to that as a single, but it was so unmemorable that I completely forgot about it, just entirely. I don't think it's a terrible song, actually. It just doesn't really fit on this album. I think it would fit more on You're Welcome than on this one, for example. But almost all of the other songs I would consider stand out to some degree or another. The balance between the more pop-punky stuff versus the more metalcore stuff never really produces any whiplash. The pacing of it all is pretty good. It doesn't do too much of one or too much of the other, and it bounces back and forth between them really well, like I said, without being too much whiplash. Really enjoyed listening to Biggle album this morning. And I'm definitely going to give this one a couple more spins. There's a small chance that I might even end up writing a dedicated album review for this thing because it surprised me a lot and I felt compelled to do as much. And part of what makes me think that I might end up doing that, actually, I'm going to give this 4 stars just for the record. I could see that actually going up with several more listens, but 4 stars is where I'm going to put it for now. My little brief review that I'm putting here on Musicboard is man, how many words is it? It is 725 words as is, unpolished and without really thinking much about it. I could definitely get this up to full video length on the channel if I really wanted to, and I think I want to. We'll see if I have the time to do that. However, I really enjoyed Biggle album Volume 1, and if Volume 2 is anywhere near its similar quality later in the year, these two collectively could definitely make up a standout, release. And really, really solid effort from these guys. It's a heck of a lot better than You're Welcome. Don't even have to ask any questions to know why that might be the case. Next up, we're going to jump into what is technically an album, but I'm going to consider it an EP. Again, kind of a situation of not having many tracks, only like 31 minutes. It also kind of sits in like a weird place in its existence in the first place. Anyway, that is the Sigma Sessions by Before I Turn, which is basically, for all intents and purposes, a remix EP. So My Dark Passenger remixes several ideas from previous tracks, previous work that Alex has done with Before I Turn, but most of the rest of the songs are just, slightly slowed down, more reverbified versions of previous songs they've released. So I've been searching for You comes from The Devil Exists, Tragedy, Hang Me and Gallows all come from Lovelorn, Hang Me and Gallows notably being back to back on the original version of the album. But these slowed and reverbed songs are just the same thing as the original versions of the songs. Basically, like they're not that much different. It's just slowed with a little bit of different vocal effects going on in there. Counting Seconds as an original song is actually a fairly decent track. I don't think it's that terrible, actually. And then it has a slowed and reverb version as well. As a sort of remix EP type of thing, like what this is basically going for, it's totally fine. If that's your thing, you're going to probably enjoy this. The problem for me is that I'm not really a remix person. Like, just as a rule, I never listen to remixes, like deluxe versions of albums that include remixes or the like. I never listen to those. I always, turn them off. I skip them. I make it so that I don't have to play them when I'm listening to a full album because they're just not my thing. So this release, as kind of a tiding over before the next portion of the storyline, the next full album, it just kind of exists for me. Again, if you like remixes, if you really love Before I Turn, you'll get something from this. But for myself, if I'm going to listen to any of these songs, especially like Hang Me or Gallows, like those two back to back, I'm just going to listen to Lovelorn. I'm not going to listen to this version of it specifically. So like, it's fine for what it is, but it's definitely not like it's just remixes. That's what this thing is. So, that's where we're going to leave that. This week, there's only a handful of singles to talk about, so we might as well go ahead and talk about them now. First off, I want to talk about Chakran's new single, Ritual, which totally solid release. I don't think I like it quite as much as the previous single, but based off of these two singles, I'm excited to hear whatever it is these guys have coming next. I should definitely circle back around to their 2024 album, one that I missed. Didn't have on my radar, didn't have this band on my radar back then, so I should definitely go back and check some of that stuff out. If these first couple of singles here, or these next couple singles, I guess, however you want to define it, are anything to go by. Enjoyed Ritual quite a bit. Also listened to the cover of Boulevard of Broken Dreams that Boy What did, that whole Plankton AI voice thing. I unironically really like just about all the songs that this guy's put out using those methods. Like, they're just fun songs, and this version of Boulevard of Broken Dreams is pretty interesting. It's pretty hard to top the perfection that is Boulevard of Broken Dreams, so I'm just going to give this 4 stars instead of 4.5 or 5. There's a couple decisions made musically here that don't fully meld with what I think Boulevard of Broken Dreams is supposed to be, so there's a little bit of a mismatch there, but I enjoy it because I really like the song, and I unironically like what this guy's doing musically as a whole. In fact, his previous 2025 single is, I believe, very near the top, if not at the top of my current 2025 single ranking list. So that should tell you how I feel about that pretty succinctly. Next up is District of Misery by Brojob, which is, I guess, fine. It's not a bad song, I guess, but it's not as good as the previous single that they released. Panda Struck by Samurai Pizza Cats was also pretty fine. Didn't really stand out, didn't really do anything as interesting as I thought Super Zero did, but solid for what it is. It's more fun, vibey type of metalcore that, say, Electric Callboy kind of realms in. And again, one of the guitarists of Electric Callboy is guitarist of Samurai Pizza Cats, so that kind of stands to reason that would be the case. Good song, just not as good as Super Zero. But next up, we are going to move into my listens just as we normally would. Last week, I reviewed Chug Machine and, talked about it then. I listened to this album again, preparing to do some copy edit stuff pretty early on in the week, whatever day it was. If I could find anything in Spotify, it would be pretty nice to see. It was on March 15th. I guess that was a while ago, a little over a week ago, but this video is coming out a couple days late, so that kind of stands to reason. I'll keep it up at the same rating. Enjoyable. If you enjoy metalcore and you enjoy instrumental music for any reason, this is going to be your jam. But speaking of instrumental music, let's talk a lot about some Wide Eyes, which I listened to quite a bit this weekend. Again, doing some copy edit work. I was listening to a lot of Wide Eyes in the meantime. I listened to re-listened to the Redux version of Terraforming by these guys. Solid album. I just enjoy everything these guys have done. I don't really need to talk a whole lot about all of that because I've talked about these guys plenty and also reviewed this album previously a few weeks back. I did re-listen to Samsara for the first time again in quite a while. I think it's hampered by the fact that it has relatively poor production and post-production stuff going on in there. It's the only one of their albums that doesn't sound like really good. That's because everything else is either been done recently enough that it just sounds good inherently or has been remixed or remastered to some degree. I still think Samsara is a pretty solid album, but because of, the weakness of just it not having a better, what do you even want to call it? Having a better sound, I guess, to it. Mixing is a little bit rough. If not for that, it would definitely be a lot easier to recommend. I think it's a little bit slept on as far as their work goes. But they need to remix or remaster it before it becomes really easy to recommend. Otherwise, I re-listened to Paradoxica again because, I also really love this album, EP, whatever you want to call it. It's great. I definitely marked the wrong date on that, so let me go ahead and edit that. That was on the 16th, was when I actually did that. 16, update rating, cool. We're going to move on to Volume, which was the band's first album, but again, this was a remaster version, so even though it came out a few years before Samsara did, it sounds a lot better. It sounds pretty contemporary. It starts exploring some of the ideas that the band would overall come to utilize over the course of their music career here. That are super solid, really good execution on most of that stuff, but also a little bit weaker. It has a lot more songs, but they're a little bit shorter. I tend to like when these guys do longer songs. They tend to be more complex most of the time, but overall still pretty solid release. I also re-listened to Terraforming Redux yet another time on the 16th as well. So, getting a little bit more experience with this album, even beyond, the handful of listens that I had given it prior. So that is the bulk of what I listened to. But I also re-listened to, Hymns and Dissonance again because I'm an absolute crazy person and cannot help myself. So we're going to count this on the 20th, rate again at 5 stars because it is a perfect album, and that is everything that I listened to. So yeah, I'm sorry for the quality of this video being super, super rough. It's kind of mediocre. Actually, I lied. I do have one more album to talk about. I forgot that I technically, kind of offhand through the director's commentary video on YouTube, the stream that the band did shortly after this album released a couple years back. I watched that video, so kind of indirectly ended up listening to this album as a result. Not technically a proper listen, but I enjoy I just messed that up. I do enjoy War of Being. I think it's pretty solid. I don't know when to put this date. I'll just put it as today because it was over a couple days that I was watching the video, so it kind of took a couple days to listen to the album. I do need to listen to this a little bit more in a dedicated format again, so that, I can have a little bit more of an appropriate rating for that in proper context. But even so, that is the video. Like I was starting to say before, I'm sorry for the quality of this video being down a little bit. Decided to take some time off, so that's why this video is coming out late. Quality of the video is poor because stuff on my computer is not really working right now, so a lot of cuts in this video where I would otherwise like for there to not be. But if you'd like to see some of my the written versions of some of these reviews that I've been showing you, check out my Musicboard profile linked in the description below. But otherwise, that is all I have for you guys this week. I'm excited to go listen to some more A Day to Remember again, listen to that album a couple more times, and maybe write a review for that. Definitely let me know if you would like to see a review on that album, if you'd like to see my bad takes in more detail. I'd be interested to let you guys know. But otherwise, that's going to be the end of this video. Like I said, next episode of Music Mania should be up on Monday like normal, assuming March Madness stuff doesn't continue to get in the way of my timing, and I decide not to, no life that again. But I should have time to be able to do that pretty much on time with the releases that I'm expecting to come out. We'll see what happens. I hope for that to come out Monday like normal. Either way, thank you guys once again for watching. For now, I've been your host, King Crusoe. You can call me KC, and I hope to see you guys in the next video.